All right, hey everybody, this is Purple Update Live. Good evening. I apologize. I did go and buy a brand new laptop. As you can see, I thought that would fix the tech issues, but apparently the internet connection, even though I was plugged directly into my modem, kept cutting out. So I'm just going to do this from my phone, and then hopefully by tomorrow I will have a better setup for everybody. I can see your chats though, so if you want to ask questions or comments on the game yesterday, you can do that. I mean, I even went out and got a fancy snowball mic and everything, so I'm a little irritated. I mean, I'm irritated anyway because of how the game went, but I'll just start over. I wasn't really looking at the screen, but I could see something popping up out of the corner of my eye, and apparently that was that I kept getting disconnected, so I'm hoping that you guys didn't bail on the show, but I wouldn't blame you if you did. There's just been tech issue after tech issue with this, and that's not the type of show that really lends itself to growing an audience. So I apologize again. It makes me really embarrassed, and I'll say that's why I'm blushing and also unable to grow a decent beard. Purple Update Live is the daily news and audience participation show of VikingsTerritory.com and purplePTSD.com. It's brought to you by Grey Duck Vodka, TicketClub.com, and TotalSportsEnterprises.com. If you want a free 12-month membership on TicketClub.com, which is like a $50 value. That means 12 months of tickets without fees. Go to purplePTSD.com's homepage. On the right side, you'll see a box for Ticket Club. Click on that. That'll bring you to the hidden super special code redemption page. Use code SKOLPTSD and you'll get a free 12-month membership. I really wanted to focus on the game from last night today and the fallout from it. I apologize for not doing the show earlier today. I know I promised you guys yesterday I'd be around, I'd have the show done around 2, but I went to go pick up my new laptop, and I have been working on getting it set up and clearly did not do a great job doing that. I'm a little worried about the connection issues, but I'll figure it out, dagnabbit. We'll talk about the game itself, the game plan, Xavier Rhodes, what to do with him at this point, Cousins' night, Cook's injury, and where to go from here. As I was saying, I'll start over on my rant, which is really hard to do because I don't want to repeat myself too much. I like to just kind of go off the cuff with this stuff. But I was not a fan of the game plan, the offensive game plan in particular. I understand that the Seahawks are an old school football team, that they match up well against what the Vikings have been doing, which the Vikings going into last night were last in the league in regards to how often they ran the 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers. And they ran that about 28% of the time. That's obviously, like I said, a league low. Teams are doing more and more 3 and 4 receiver sets almost all the time. That requires teams on defense to run the nickel, which is why the nickel is kind of the norm now. The Seattle runs, they like to have their 3 linebackers on the field. Between the 3, one's out there 100% of the snaps, one's out there 94.5. The other one is almost 75% of the time on the field. That's not normal in the NFL in 2019. And the Vikings run 12, 13, and 22 personnel sets a lot, which are 2 or 3 tight ends, 2 running backs, old school formations. And I get that they wanted to not play into the strength of Seattle's defense in Seattle. I'm not ignorant of that. But I feel like, a championship team at some point is going to go up against an opponent in the playoffs that is good at stopping what they do, for the most part. And at some point, you're just going to have to be better at doing what you do than the opponent is at stopping that. And whenever the Vikings under Zimmer have faced that scenario, they deviate from what has made them successful, and they do things that they haven't done all season, and that is not going to work, and it hasn't worked. I've joked that if there was merch for this show, it would have a slogan, "Don't get too cute, damn it." Last night they got too cute again. Cousins was out of the shotgun all the time. How many times did they run a play action? How many times did Cousins roll out to his left or roll out, period? Clowney has spurts of brilliance, and maybe they didn't want to run him Cousins that way, especially after Riley Reef went down. But he didn't go down till the second half, so there's no excuse in the first half to not do what has made you successful. Period. I just don't. I think it's timid. I think it's cowardice. I think it tells your team that you don't think they're as good at what they're doing as another team is at stopping it, and it never works. It didn't work last night. And that having been said, there were 30 points on the board. Now, 7 of those were one of the craziest plays ever, in a pick six by Anthony Harris. But, I just didn't like that game plan. But that wasn't really the totality of the issue with that game. Before I get into that a little bit more, I'm going to read some of your comments. Hey, Tang, you made it, man. Sorry, like I said, I think on my other show, I don't know, it's all blurring together now. I try to go around 2 or 3 every day, but I was going to pick up my laptop that I've been working on getting it set up, and I was all excited because I have an actual cool mic now. That's not a headset. That doesn't make me look like a 14-year-old who got Xbox Live for Christmas. And I'm having issues, I guess, with my laptop staying connected, which is really disconcerting considering it's plugged into my modem. So Tang, and if you're new to the show, I like to read comments on air. Eventually, I want to be able to get people to join us or kind of call in. But if you have any questions or comments, you can type them regardless of what platform you're on. I will see them. Tang said that they did show they can hang with the elite of the NFC, NFL. I agree with you. And there's no reason that they shouldn't, I guess. I don't want to crap on that take because that's how I felt. Last night, Joe Oberle and I did our first live game commentary on the iOS app Hot Mic, and I was saying that. I mean, this shows that the Vikings are one of the powerhouse teams, but they just do Vikings-y things. My girlfriend is a reformed Packers fan. She's been sober from the Packers for this season only. If anyone gets weird about that joke, I've been sober for 6 years, so I guess I can say that. And she has said on multiple occasions, "How do you handle this? It's so stressful." And the answer is not very well, clearly. Yeah, I mean, they very well could have won that game. I would argue they almost should have won that game, despite the disastrous third quarter, a quarter that was one of the worst in recent or even team history. They still had a chance to go ahead down by 4 late in the game. They could have tied it on a final drive, or perhaps if CJ Ham didn't decide to. I don't fault him, I guess, for returning it. There wasn't a whole lot of time on the clock. I would have, I guess, in retrospect, preferred he taken a knee, but 11 or 10 to 15 yards is huge in that situation. But yeah, they did show that they can hang, but at this point they should do that. Our roster is really, really good. We've invested a lot in terms of salary cap, so on and so forth. But I don't. I wrote an article after the Bears game, facetiously saying like I'm the president of the Doom and Gloom Society, and let me explain to you why people like me really just don't have any faith in this team as currently constructed, really making a run in the long term. And there were 3 reasons for that. Any of those 3 could kind of rear their head at any given time. I think 2 of the 3 did last night. One was Cousins regressing, or Cousins playing like he did in the Bears game or the Packers game. 2 is Xavier Rhodes or the secondary, and 3 is just bad coaching decisions. I did not like the coaching decisions last night, and Rhodes at this point is such a liability that it almost is. It's going to ruin the season. Would have advocated for benching him regardless of what happened. If Hughes was getting burned, or Holton Hill, or some combination of the two, because at the point of the touchdown, he'd been targeted 4 times, for our 99 yards, and he gave up that touchdown. He had a chance to make an actual positive play, a decent open field tackle, even though the guy was kind of close to the sidelines. Or before that, he got the 15-yard penalty. I don't know what you guys think about that penalty. I thought it was a good call. Joe didn't agree with me, but you have to be smarter than that. You knew where he was. You knew he was going out of bounds, and you can't drive a guy into the field regardless. So that was a killer. That ended up, that wouldn't have necessarily been the end of that drive, but they scored a touchdown on that drive. The best way to put Rhodes this night is, how many times did you really see Trey Waynes last night? Twice, 3 times. They were picking on Rhodes like a rookie with a torn ACL. And that's what good quarterbacks do. And this is one of the highest paid guys on the team, on the defense, on the team in general, in the NFL at the position. And he is just bad. He's bad. It's not just that he's slowed down, he's bad. It's in his head. Zimmer benched him for a little while after that touchdown, and he threw his helmet, and Zimmer after the game said, we have to control our emotions better. And I'll get you guys' comments in a second. But his argument that, I didn't have any safety help on the Moore touchdown. They've obviously practiced that play a ton of times. He knew on that play that he didn't have safety help. He knew where the safeties were. He knew where Harrison Smith was. He also saw Harrison Smith in front of him. So that's not an excuse. I don't know if I know the announcers mentioned it because I read about it today, but I didn't hear it because we were doing our own live game commentary. But if he's using that excuse in public, then he's a liar because he knows that's not what happened. Yeah, I mean, it hurts not having Thielen, but it hasn't hurt up until this point. I just don't agree with going away from what got them to this point. It's been a historical run for this offense, how great Cousins has been playing without Thielen. And you go away from that. I understand that you can't just keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, and teams will learn and they'll get better and they'll find ways to stop it. But they almost rolled out a completely different game plan. I mean, last year Cousins was awful out of the shotgun. We haven't seen a ton of it this year because of that, and it felt like every single passing down was a shotgun play, and I just don't understand why you would do that. That having been said, they still had a chance to come back and to win this game. I'm sure there were people on that last drive that were saying, Cousins had his shot. I saw a headline that's saying Cousins had a chance for his moment, and he let it pass. But when you go away from what got you to that point, you're doing these shotgun throws that are all underneath throws. I mean, the only really decent gains that we had were screens, and then when they finally decided to throw to Kyle Rudolph in the second half, I don't know where that was in the first half either. We've increasingly utilized the tight ends, and so for Cosmos and Dicey's comment about Thielen, what's helped increasingly with Thielen being out is utilizing the tight ends, and we didn't do that either. It was a lot of just underneath stuff, check down stuff, by design, and that's a cowardly way to play. I get that you want to dink and dunk and take the crowd out of it, and in the second half you lose Dalvin Cook on what could have been the worst play in team history. I mean, Dalvin Cook fumbles, he gets hurt, Diggs gets hurt at the same time, but I just am not a fan of that philosophy. I feel like, again, at some point you're going to have to enforce your will and say we're good enough to do what we do well against anybody. The Patriots, and I hate using that excuse as like some sort of unattainable goal or something, but the Patriots don't do that. And so, it hurt losing Dalvin. He said he'll definitely be back on Sunday, but at this point, the Vikings are only ahead one game ahead of the Rams. They had a 93% chance before this game to make the playoffs. They got to win out just to be comfortable, and then you can hope maybe the Packers get upset at some point, and then the Vikings end up maybe winning the division. But the playoffs aren't even a gimme at this point. But I don't really have any faith in the playoffs either, because Rhodes can't stop anybody. I don't think Zimmer will bench him. I'm a little surprised about that, because he's ripped on Rhodes so consistently in the media and said he doesn't earn his money, and this was before he was playing like this. But Rhodes is such a liability that he, by himself, basically can negate the work that the 10 other guys on the field do. Now, that having been said, I wasn't really too pleased with the defense either. I mean, they go into that game the sixth best rush defense, and they were just getting carved up. They gave up 444 yards total, I think 216 or 218 on the ground. You're not going to win a lot of games in that situation when the other team is able to run like that. A lot of first downs, they'd pick up 8 or 9 yards, and then the defense would at least stop them on short downs. But it wasn't a great performance despite the score, and that should tell you that if the Vikings are able to fix what's wrong with them, that they have a good shot to make a run. But I really don't feel like that's going to happen. And even if they fix what is going on defense, I just worry again about these coaching decisions in big games. Zimmer, for all the talk of Cousins in primetime or Monday Night Football 0-8 or whatever, I'm going to have to write an article this week about Zimmer in big games, and maybe you guys can help me define what a big game might be, primetime, or with like last year, winning in against the Bears. I'll figure that out, but I'm going to write about that. But at this point, I don't think it's going to, I don't know what they can do. You don't know what you have in Hughes. It usually takes corners a few years to get caught up to speed in Zimmer's system. He's only a few games back from his ACL injury. Holton Hill didn't play for the first 8 games of the year, but I really don't think that they can do much worse than what Rhodes is doing. So you're going to have to put him in. You're going to have to put him in quickly so they can at least get up to speed before the playoffs, assuming that you even make the playoffs. Let's get into some comments really quickly. Yeah, I mean, people are saying, do you mean, when you say Abdullah, do you mean CJ Ham? On the return? I see why he returned it again. He wanted to pick up 10, 15, maybe 20 yards, and he had a good game. He's had a great season in Ham. But that was it felt right, and it hurt. But that third quarter was so bad, and Diggs, it's almost eerie that the last 2 interceptions that Cousins has had, and he broke the franchise record for the most passes between interceptions. He's had 4 interceptions on the year, and 2 of them two were in the Packers game, and then he's had 2 that went off of Diggs's face mask or helmet. It was so Vikings in that it started out great and you were like confident, but you wanted the game to end, right? So they could win. And then they have this disastrous stretch where you're like, God, the game's over. This is awful. Dalvin fumbles, then there was the interception, and then all of a sudden they start to come back and they get your hopes up again, and no. And so, really, if people think I'm being too harsh on the play calling, I would blame the play calling for the Chiefs' loss. If not for Cousins' heroics against the Broncos, that first half play calling was nonsense. And it took heroics to beat that team at home. And so it's really disheartening, and I know they lost by 7 points, and people are saying what a thrilling game nationally, and the silver lining is that you could say that the Vikings are able to play with the best in the NFC, but I want them to be the best in the NFC, and I want them to win games like this. I don't want it to come down to the just gut-wrenching mistakes, and for whatever reason, that is just what happens with this team, and it doesn't matter what decade it is. It doesn't matter what players are on the team. It doesn't really matter what coaches are coaching them. It just always seems to happen to us, and it's exhausting. It gets so old. I think Cosmo says their long term is one playoff win, maybe two tops. I agree with you. They're going to end up playing on the road. And I just don't have any faith in these coaches. I thought maybe they would learn at some point that maybe we should just at least go down doing what you do well. You know what I mean? Like, don't go down and say, well, we lost because we tried something new and it blew up in our face again. But we're going to learn from it. They don't learn from it. It seems to be spreading. It's not just Zimmer now. It's Stefanski or Kubiak. It's insane. And Rudolph is playing, when you throw him the ball, for all the crap he gets for not being physical enough, so on and so forth, he catches the ball over 80% of the time you throw it to him for his career. This season, he's caught it a lot. I mean, there was the deep ball last night, which I don't understand why, if you're going to take your shot down the field, you go to the slowest guy on the field. But if they involved him more, he seems really hard to stop. He's making Randy Moss-esque catches with one hand. Why aren't you involving him more, especially when you have Kubiak? Oh, I know why. Because you decide to get four wide when you are missing. Treadwell, I'm happy that he had that touchdown. The corner bit on Cousins running for the first down. He was wide open. Good for him. But when you are short Thielen and you're down to a rookie and Treadwell and a guy that you just activated this week, maybe don't spread out your offense so much. Maybe go to those tight ends more. I don't know. It's just I mean, the fact that is how the game went and they still had a chance to win at the end is encouraging. But the fact that the game went that way also is so discouraging that it eliminates the encouragement, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Tang just said, play calling, poor defense, and poor coaching is killing this amazing offense this season. It's the Vikings way. I can't think of a better way to put it, to be honest with you. And then he followed up with Rudolph is still a top 10 tight end that is criminally underused, and it's not just a misdemeanor crime. It's a felony when you have Kubiak there, and that's what he's known for. And you have a guy in Irv Smith Jr. that everybody has said is going to be a superstar in this league, and you are without your top receiver, and you have such limited depth that you have a guy that you brought up this week, and you have a guy in Treadwell who you cut. There's no excuse for it. And if you want to, dink and dunk, then throw to your tight ends. Because Rudolph's not going to break tackles, but he's going to catch the ball, and he's going to pick up yardage. I don't know. And again, I'm sure people aren't happy with that last drive and Cousins' poise or lack thereof, but he brought them back. He got them into the game. He made good decisions, but the play calling was just atrocious. You're not going to beat the Seahawks by dumping the ball off, and you can't do that when there's limited time on the clock either. You're going to they took hardly any shots down the field. Not to mention, the Seahawks last night, going back to the defense, Lockett is clearly not 100%. I would argue he's barely 50. He had to go to the hospital because of a contusion on his leg for 2 days. A little over a week ago. And so you're going and you have a rookie in DJ Metcalf, and you can't stop them. I've said this before, and I'm trying to not repeat myself too much because I know a lot of you guys have been here every day. But the fact that the problem with this defense is the secondary speaks volumes about Zimmer. Since Zimmer was, is known and was known as a quarterback whisperer, and we've spent so much draft capital to construct what he wanted. And, you give Rhodes $13.3 million for this season. And Anyway, I wrote an article yesterday about whether or not Cousins' contract in retrospect was a bargain. I posted it on purplePTSD.com. You can check it out. I'm gonna post it on VikingsTerritory.com probably after this show. You can check that out if you want to. There's just it's metric based, not so much just me ranting. So it's based on numbers and ways that people basically assess performance to dollars and saying, well, this quarterback earned 30 million because on the season because he performed this way, whereas this guy's making 25 million, but he only really earned 5.5 or whatever. It's an interesting read. It's food for thought. Do you mean to end the game, Tang? Tang said he would have expected a screen on second or third down when it was working all game long. Yeah. I didn't like those play calls at all. And on the third down one, I mean, yeah, just dink and dunk stuff. You know, when every catch was heavily contested outside of the screens. You know, the final throw was that to I blacked out. Was it to BC Johnson? I believe it was. It wasn't a great throw by Cousins, but I mean those guys. You can't expect rookies and guys who have 10 catches in their entire career in that instance to make catches when they have guys draped all over them. Now I would argue at points I felt like the Seahawks were early, and it's hard to really ascertain when you watch a game on mute and you're doing commentary yourself. You don't hear what the announcers are saying. You don't really hear stuff from the sidelines or what the coaches said at halftime or so on and so forth. But I did see some of my writers in texting last night that were really upset about some of the play calls. And so I was wondering if they were mad about the lack of calls. I know there were, Diggs had that call down the field that was nice, play action, or pass interference rather. But I was wondering if you guys thought perhaps there was some officiating issues last night. I guess I didn't pick up on that as much, but I was... This is why I rewatch games, because it's very nerve-wracking for me. And I'm not even saying that to be like, oh, look what a big fan I am. I'm emotionally unstable during games. I get very, very nervous. And it's for whatever reason, maybe I'm in like a weird fight or flight mode. It makes it hard to retain things as easily as you otherwise would. It's not like watching an episode of Seinfeld or something. It's more like watching the results to an STD test or something. Yeah, okay, so what, it was Irv Smith at the end. Yeah, but yeah, I don't get it. In what other game where have the Vikings run almost solely shotgun 4 receivers set? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm way off on that. I don't think Joe agreed with me too much. I think he... Sorry, I cut off for a second. He's not a contrarian, but he likes to take the other side, especially because I seem hyperbolic. I think my points are valid or rational, but my responses, the way that I put them, aren't. And so, he was saying, yeah, but their defense is good, and you don't want to do exactly what they would expect. But that's kind of eventually how football works. There's only so many options, and your team is constructed a certain way. It'd be like when we had Randy Moss in '98 saying, well, we're just going to confuse the other team by not airing it out to them. Instead, we're going to just give the rock to Robert Smith 95% of the time. That's a very extreme example because Moss was otherworldly, but you get my point. It's just I don't get why you wouldn't get Cousins out of the pocket more. Especially after one of the few times he does get out of the pocket, it ends up in a wide open touchdown down the field in Treadwell because they weren't expecting it because we hadn't been doing it all freaking game. Yeah, a lot. Tank said they could have run a quick slant, and that's what's funny about it. They weren't just doing dink and dunk stuff. They were doing like Teddy Bridgewater era stuff, like. And you said this, Tank, so I'm not trying to steal your take. the routes where the receiver, like button hooks, where the receiver runs and then turns around and gets ready for the catch. Like nothing where a guy could catch it in stride and get yards after the catch. No slants, nothing quick that way. It was all run X amount of yards, turn around, and then get draped and hope that Cousins can get the ball in there. Surprisingly, I think that's why they drafted Treadwell in the first place, because Teddy wasn't great at hitting receivers in motion or hitting receivers down the field. He kind of had a sidearm motion, and so it was just a lot of Thielen or Diggs or Wallace even running a yard or two past the first down, turning around and putting their hands up and waiting for the ball. That's what Treadwell was supposed to be good at. He was supposed to be the contested catch guy that has ups and the strength and whatnot to do that. And I always argued before that draft that they shouldn't draft him, because you can go look at this on mockdraftables.com. You would think a guy that's good at contested catches in that context would be good at having a good vertical jump or upper body strength. And his vertical and bench press were in like the bottom 20 percentile of his draft class. He did as many reps on the bench press as I probably could do after a month of training, like 8 or something. Granted, I'm a bigger guy, but I'm also the world's laziest man, so I found that surprising. His ups were atrocious. If his life depended on clearing a curb running across the street, we would have to all wear ribbons for him. So I knew he was going to be a bust because he was a one-trick pony, and I was arguing that his one trick didn't even work. And that ended up being the case. But in his defense, I guess, they brought him in to do that, and then Teddy got hurt, and they moved to a Shurmur sort of more fully fleshed out offense that doesn't rely on that kind of stuff and more quick slants and down the field stuff, and he's just not built to do that. I think he could be successful in perhaps that context, but I mean, a lot of Treadwell stuff too was between the ears and having a lot of drops, which is the last thing you want from your third receiver, because he's not going to get the ball every week, but if he does, it's usually in a big situation. But yeah, I didn't like that, even the way they were doing the dink and dunk stuff. If they were doing more quick slant stuff, more yards after the catch stuff, I would have liked it to kind of, if they did that and some screens, or the screens that they did do, sure. But especially when it's that late in the game and field position is obviously very important, you never know. I mean, look what happened in the Minneapolis Miracle. Why not set up plays where the guy has a chance, especially with, Diggs' ability early in the game. He was showing, his tenacity to not go down and to spin and pick up extra yards. And so why do it that way? And I'm sure the argument from some people is going to be because that's what the defense was giving them. But again, I would argue, well, what are we even doing then? If every game is predicated on avoiding what the other team does well, then we're never going to win. That's the best way for me to put it. And, yeah, man. Tang mentions, this is a great comment, man. You're killing it right now. You're the anti-Vikings. I feel like I'm dinking and dunking with my takes. You might have to, man. I'm happy you're not doing a show opposite mine. I'll tell you that much. He says the bootlegs and play action. I mean, where were the comeback routes? The Seahawks were playing so far off the receivers. Could have easily done some comeback routes. Yeah, I mean, we've all seen in those instances, especially when there's not a lot of time on the clock, that they're going to give you space, especially across the middle. I think the Vikings had one timeout left on the last drive. I can't remember. But they were going to give that to you. So to do these sideline, there was more than enough time to take some shots across the middle of the field, is my point. On the last drive, there wouldn't have been, had Ham not dropped that, but I think people need to really. I want to go back and read the article about Cousins had a chance for his defining moment. He didn't take it. I think it's on NBCSports.com or something. I saw it on Bleacher Report. Like the first half of the Broncos game, where Cousins, I think, was 11 of 12 or something, but they had like 50 yards passing. Sometimes he can only do what the game plan is, and clearly sometimes uh, it's they're just I don't know. I don't remember a team that we've ever had that was this all over the place in terms of philosophy. When depending on opponent or week, I just don't remember watching. And I'm looking back at good Vikings teams. I don't remember in 2009 doing such weird shit from versus in this week or that week. Now you always want to look at the opponent and maybe change up what you're doing, add new wrinkles, but you don't fundamentally change your entire offense. Or you know what I mean? It's just, am I crazy? I just feel like that play calling was, and they still were in the game, which should tell you how talented they are, being down Thielen, and then Cook was out in the second half, and they still could have come back. But it's like they're almost holding themselves back, and that scares me. But it's all a moot point because if it's a close game in the playoffs and they're calling a perfect game on offense, I don't know what you do. I mean, do you agree with me, Tang, or anyone else that's out there? Randy, you made it the last second, man. I'm glad that I've been repeating myself for the last couple of minutes. Do you guys? I mean, at this point, I say bench Rhodes completely and let Hughes and Holton Hill play. Because eventually you're gonna have to do that anyway. So the sooner you do it, the more time they'll have before the playoffs started. Because the thing is if Rhodes was gonna bounce back, it would have been this week because he had 5 days off, the bye week. They got back to fundamentals in practice. I was hoping that he would either get healthy enough or. My argument has been, I'm sure you've heard this, Randy and Tang, so I'm not going to repeat it too much. But for those that haven't, and I just got logged out of Restream, so I can't see your comments. I'm going to try to come back in. It'll let me. That he would say, okay, sometimes I'm in decent position and I could make a stop, but I'm not because I'm a little bit slower or banged up and I'm not in the exact position I'm used to, so my muscle memory isn't helping me stop. But I thought with the time off, maybe getting healthy and then getting back to fundamentals, he'll say, I can just relearn how to do that in a lesser form of my body. Like I'm a split second later, so I'll figure it out now and just adjust what I do accordingly. And if anything, he made a tremendous step backwards. And at this point, is such a liability that I think we saw Trey Waynes once or twice the entire game. They just were picking on him constantly. And even when he had a good play, he ruined it with that 15-yard penalty. It's everything that's wrong with him. He's slow. He's getting beat physically and mentally. I don't want to hear that he thought he had safety help on that play. He knew what that play was. He saw Harrison Smith in front of him. That was a mental mistake, but it was also a physical one because he wasn't. I mean, look how slow he looked on that play. And then when he makes a good play, he ruins it with the 15-yard penalty. It could have been a tackle for a loss. That could have been huge. It could have stopped that touchdown that they had. And then even when he has a decent enough coverage, I mean, the only reason, and I've seen articles where people are like, well, he kind of made it up for it by forcing that fumble. The only reason he forced that fumble, and I said this at the time, and I was kind of kidding, but it's true, was that he was so late and so far off the ball that he came in and his shoulder hit the ball as the guy turned and took 2 steps. Horrible call on the field, by the way, that was an incomplete pass. But in the joke I made at the time is the receiver's probably thinking, why am I so wide open? Why haven't I been hit yet? This is awesome, and boom. It's like he didn't expect it because the coverage was so bad. So in the sense that, yeah, maybe he helped attempt to negate that horrible third quarter by forcing that fumble. But the only reason he forced that fumble was because he was completely out of position and beat. You know what I mean? So I don't even look at that as a positive. I look at that as a fluke on another negative. And so... and I'm not even thinking about Rhodes. Or Curse. You're right. Put Curse out there. Because if he gets beat, he's going to at least pull out a 9mm and shoot the guy. Hey, topical humor. Laughter is the best medicine. And yeah, it was just bad. So I'm sad, but it's fun to have a group of people to vent to. Because Lord knows I don't get that at home. Help me, Dr. Phil. I'm your daughter. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in as always. I promise I'll be back around 2 tomorrow. I did go get a new computer, and I even got one of these fancy giant microphones, and I have that new webcam, and it kept logging me. I kept losing my connection earlier, so I'm on my phone again, but I'll figure that out tonight. For whatever reason, I bought this from Walmart.com, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was defective. It should not be logging me out over and over again like that. I mean, I'm hardwired in. I'm plugged right into my modem, so that's disconcerting. Anyway, I appreciate you guys coming through. I might rename this as some sort of like purple therapy or just purple group therapy or something because, I mean, again, we're only a game ahead of the Rams somehow, and I don't remember what the rest of their schedule is, and I don't think they're that great, but the playoffs aren't an afterthought. The Vikings need to win out now. Maybe the Packers will get upset, but again, with the issues that we're discussing, there's no way we are going to win a close big game, and that's really sad because I mean, really, I'm looking at the silver lining almost in a negative light now that I'm thinking about it because this team is so talented and so good that they only lost that game by 7 points, despite all of the disastrous decisions and mistakes. And that to me is just, God, it was just such a microcosm of being a Vikings fan, wasn't it? I mean, getting your hopes up and knowing that they're better than that and seeing it go down that way, it's not even frustrating at this point. It's just really depressing. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't think you can. Outside of getting an exorcist to figure out like what God was angered when they built like the stadium in Bloomington back in the 60s. I really thought that the coaches would I'm not even kidding. We have to make those "Don't Get Too Cute" shirts. I'm gonna make them tonight, and I'll show them to you guys tomorrow on Spreadshirt because it's a huge part of the problem, and they're clearly not getting the message that they need to just. Again, I would rather lose doing what you do than lose this way. And maybe they wouldn't have won. Maybe they still would have had the same mistakes. I during halftime I said, well, what's good is we're winning, and they still have a lot of those plays in their back pocket. They can still roll out. They can still do some play action in the second half. They can do some no huddle. Pick up the tempo, and it's kind of like in the preseason where you don't show too much than you have in your back pocket. I mean, again, look when Cousins did roll out. Granted, it was to his right, not his left. That corner bit hard, and Treadwell of all people was wide open. You know how bad it has to be for Treadwell to be wide open. And so that was like my encouragement during halftime, but it didn't happen. Obviously, I mean, it would have been great on that last drive had they decided to maybe do what they do best. And I don't know, maybe they said, well, they're not going to buy that we're doing any play action stuff because Cook is hurt. But I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. This team makes me so upset. Thank you. Our Tang reminded me that the Rams are playing the Seahawks twice and the 49ers once. Although nothing surprises me in football anymore. I remember in college watching. I think the Vikings were 9-6 at the time, and they just had to beat the Cardinals to make it to the playoffs. And it was 4th and 26 at the end of the game, and they threw that. That's when you had Paul Allen was relatively new at play-by-play, and this is kind of, I think, what endeared him with a lot of fans. The no, like the really long, just no, the push-out touchdown. I remember watching that in college alone at my house on campus, and then walking into the bathroom, taking my glasses off, and in like a movie, I've never done this before or since, putting cold water on my face and staring at myself in the mirror and getting this feeling of dread and being like, I have nothing to look forward to. Um, I got so sad about it.
You've been medicated ever since?
And yeah, it's been downhill ever since. I just pinpointed. If I had a time machine, I could go back to that point and just shoot myself as I'm looking in the mirror, like the end of Deadpool 2.
But scene in Royal Tenenbaums.
When he shaves his head and cuts his wrists.
Yes.
I know what I'm doing tonight.
Don't shave your head.
Oh yeah, I want to leave a hipster corpse. Alrighty. Well, I'll check in with you guys tomorrow.